Okay. All right. So you start drinking and it starts out rare. How does it sort of build? And we're not going to be able to go too in depth, but tell us how it went from the first time to a problem in a short kind of summary.
It was kind of a problem right from the beginning. And my pattern was I was always sort of a binge drinker. So I was never a daily drinker. I was always a functional alcoholic. So this whole time I'm working full time, being pretty successful in my career, doing design work at the time on roller coasters and that kind of thing. And I'm doing like side gigs. So I have like a side business and I'm doing well there. So I'm working all the time, a lot of hours, doing well in the workplace. And then whenever I have an opportunity, I would just drink a lot. And it was when Kirsten was gone, or else, sometimes on weekends. And I'd go, it might be a month between drinking sessions, right? So it's not like I would just drink all the time. I would drink when the opportunity was right and I could have time and space to do it. And sometimes I started making time. So I would we bought a camper and I'd take the kids out camping. Kirsten didn't like to go camping, so I could just go there, and now I've got all the kids, and then I'm just hanging out there around the campfire drinking just with the kids.
I think a huge component to this is that he was drinking in secret. He was drinking, like you said, when it was convenient, when I was not there, in secret. Okay.
Why is that important, Kirsten?
Because when it all hit the fan, that relationship of trust that I talked about in the beginning of our relationship, it was shattered. It was totally shattered into 3 million pieces. And that is what rocked our marriage. If you do not have a relationship of trust with each other, I found out that he was taking our 2 young sons with him camping, and he was drinking. He was getting drunk with my 2 young sons. These stories would come up after the fact, and he was not being open with me at all. And those years of the alcoholism, the trust gauge, like I said, I can't even articulate what that did to our relationship. It became a very, very extremely stressful thing to me. And I still have post-traumatic stress from that, that we have to work through.
Absolutely. So it's about trust. And this is a typical pattern with a mixed faith couple. When the believer stops believing, there are all sorts of things they don't want to do. They don't want to wear their garments anymore. They don't want to pay tithing. They don't want to attend church. Sometimes they don't want to admit their disbelief. Maybe they want to start drinking, or maybe they start feeling sexually awakened or curious. And in all those cases, they fear what happens if they're open and direct about the differences. And so whether it's just stopping to paying tithing, changing the amount you pay, whether it's not wearing your garments on business trips or trying to, whatever that is, relationships you might have on Facebook in private, drinking just a little bit of alcohol or beer or wine on a business trip or with a buddy. I do feel very, very strongly that, someone just posted this, you gain credibility in drops, but you lose it in buckets.
Right.
And I think that's true. And I just want to, on behalf of the non-believing part in a couple, I just want to say, be upfront. If you want to stop wearing your garments, have the hard conversation now versus erode your credibility later. If you want to start drinking on the road or in private, talk to your spouse about it and be open. If you're going to change how you pay tithing, be direct, because trust and credibility is precious. and it's not worth it. The little wine to have on a business trip, or the little money you save with tithing by secretly changing how much you pay, or the comfort that you get from not wearing your garments. I promise you, none of that is worth betraying the trust of your partner. And more importantly, the pain and suffering that you're going to experience later once everything comes to a head and you've become the type of person that you criticize the church for being. You become a deceiver when you think you're standing for truth. And it's just, and Dave, this isn't, we've all done this sort of thing. And I think the whole spirit of this interview is to help teach lessons that prevent people from suffering later. And so,
hey, John,
Dave, please jump in.
One thing I want to say is, so I think, and the reason why I don't love to expose myself with my alcoholism, I feel obligated to it. So I brought it out at this marriage retreat because I know it's a common issue with people leaving the church. And so one thing I would want to express is that I've known lots of people over the years that drink alcohol, and they'll drink like a beer with dinner, and they're fine. I've seen lots and lots of people that drink in a healthy way. I know people currently that I know are that way. But coming out of the church, it's just important to do a careful evaluation with something like alcohol, because a person leaving the church is often really at risk for problems with alcohol. And I would say that if the spouse is not on board with you drinking alcohol, but alcohol is so important that you would drink anyway, that's a big red flag, right? Because a person that drinks healthy, that's a healthy drinker that drinks like a wine and glass with dinner, it is here nor there to somebody that's healthy with it. Somebody that's going to become addicted to it or have patterns of alcoholism has to do it. It feels a real sense of urgency or need to do it. So just needing to do it when your spouse doesn't approve is something that the person that wants to drink should be really concerned about and think about, in my opinion. So yeah, I just want to be clear that I don't think drinking alcohol itself is a bad thing. Lots of people do it. It's okay. But you have to really evaluate that if you're going to start to do it.
Absolutely. Okay, so David, how long was it between your first drink and you sort of, looking back, feel like you were an alcoholic?
The first time he took that drink, he was an alcoholic.
Well,
in his family.
I didn't think of myself as an alcoholic until I got a DUI. So I got it in 2010. I got a DUI. I was at the.
But you had been drinking before that DUI. He had been drinking off and on. You know, it would go in cycles, as he explained. But there was a good, 5 years probably.
Yeah, so about 6 years.
About 6 years of the drinking. The erosion of trust in that period of time.
But so
another thing too, that I don't know if you want to talk about this now, John, but Dave, did make the comment that you have to be analyzing yourself from the alcoholic's perspective. If it's going to be something that you have to hide from your spouse or go under the table, or you need it constantly, then that should bring up a red flag. But there was also in the middle of this 5-year period where we were going to marriage counseling to try to cope with the fact that Dave wanted to be a social drinker in our marriage. Do you want to talk about that right now, or do you want to save that?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think a lot of people that drink, I think of it as Russian roulette a little bit. So David, as you said, most people in the world have a beer with lunch or a couple beers, or they have a glass of wine with dinner. and they live until they're a ripe old age, and it's never a problem. Some people try alcohol and they're like, I don't like it. It's not that, it doesn't taste good. It's not interesting to me. It doesn't make me feel good. And I would say that's probably, I don't know, maybe 95 out of 100 people that try it, they're able to have just a healthy relationship with it. The challenge with it is that it's like it can be like a gun with 100 chambers or 95 chambers. But if you happen to be that unlucky person, it can wreck your life.
Well, and both my dad and grandfather died alcoholics. My grandfather died of he had cirrhosis liver and shot himself. My dad died, and he was 51. My dad died at 50 from alcoholism. So I have a pattern of it. So if you have a pattern, really watch out.
So take seriously any patterns in your family history. What else?
That's what was terrifying to me, is because I knew the family history, and so when all of this came out after secretly doing it for many years, without me knowing, I mean, it was just, like I said, I can't even describe the pain that I was experiencing, feeling so alone. I couldn't share this with my family, right? There were a few people that I would share things here and there with, but I felt totally encapsulated in this little bubble, and it was just an experience I just wish or hope that anyone has to experience. It's so heartbreaking. It's so intense. Yeah. So do you want me to start telling you about when he approached me about socially drinking?
Yeah, I mean, well, let's just talk about how you guys were able to heal, and what the recovery process was like.
Well,
Because
the social drinking aspect was not part of the healing process. That was actually building on the alcoholism. I was totally terrified when he came and told me that, well, now that you know about this, like when we go out to restaurants and things like that, I want to take a drink. And like I've said before, my core value, like my very inner core, I've never been appealed to the alcohol. I've never liked that scene. I've never placed myself there. And so when my spouse, comes to me and says, well, I want to make this a part of our life. And I'm thinking, no, this cannot happen. I don't want this around my children, which it had been secretly. My relationship of trust was already broken with that. And now you want to go out in the public and just drink? Like, the first thought that came to me was, what if my bishop sees us drinking in you drinking in a restaurant? That was my first initial thought. But it was just so profound to the point that we really did have to go to marriage counseling. I was like, I can't do that. I can't be in that situation. And Dave was just very fervent that was what he needed to do. But the underlining foundation of this all was, I knew in my heart that he was an alcoholic. He wasn't admitting that right then, but I knew in my heart that he was an alcoholic. And it took a lot of faith to stay in our relationship and let life unfold itself. But I knew at that moment in time that if we didn't reach out for additional help, that we were not going to make it through. So
Was the DUI rock bottom for you, David, or were there other instances that were more rock bottom?
And the DUI didn't happen until, like, we were going through the counseling and everything, but the DUI still was 2 years out from that point of the social drinking and, the counseling of trying to cope with that in our marriage. And
Well,
if Dave can answer that question, I don't know if that was his rock bottom or not.
well, to answer because you hear a lot about people talk about the rock bottom kind of concept with alcoholism and drug addiction. In my opinion, from my experience, I would say this rock bottom for a lot of people, rock bottom is when you die. Like people will do this thing until they die. They do it. That happens a lot. So there's not any really this rock bottom, and then I've hit this rock bottom, and now that's enough pain that I'm for sure going to decide to recover. But it was a bottom, and I would say pain for an alcoholic is it sort of brings on a moment of clarity. So it's sort of like you're just kind of kicked into a river. Right now you're like in this daydream state. You think the world is this way, and it's sort of like just a delusion. And then all of a sudden this very painful, surreal experience happens, and now I was just sort of kicked into reality. So when the DUI happened, it was a very traumatic, painful experience for me. And I was like, all of a sudden I'm like, woke up from my daydream or my delusion, and I that was the point when I first realized, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. It was obvious to my wife, and it should have been obvious to me way before then, but that was the sort of the moment of clarity that I had where I realized I was an alcoholic, and I was committed to quit. It was enough that I started to quit, and I did quit for a significant period of time. That's when I started doing the LDS 12-step program. I did that for about 6 months. And I actually started running marathons. So I started running. I had to work off hours for my DUI. I remember I was out shoveling snow, working off hours at this food shelter. And just that feeling in my muscles felt really good. And I decided to start running. And then I running a couple of marathons. So I had a couple of year stretch where I did well. I didn't like the LDS 12-step program. We don't have to get into anything about that other than it wasn't something that I cared for. I had problems with it, and that's why I only did it for 6 months. I just kind of tried to do it on my own, and then.
Well, really quickly, the Alcoholics Anonymous is sort of world famous for actually being quite helpful and useful to people. And at some point, back in 2008, 2009, the church sort of adopted that model and adapted it a bit. So, David,
talking about the DUI, can I express some feelings about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So when that happened, for me, I was a hospice case manager when I first became a registered nurse. And so I would do 7 days on and 7 days off, and I was covering the evening hours. And so this was another opportunity where Dave didn't have me there, and I was out working for the family, providing for our family. And like Dave said, he's always been a great provider. We've always had good health insurance through all of our things with our son. But, I was out working for the family, and Dave was home binge drinking on the weekend. And it was so hard for me because I knew that was going to happen. I knew that he was doing it. He would be very dishonest with me, but I knew that it was happening, and it put a lot of stress on my shoulders because I was providing for the family, but knowing that I was leaving my young children to their father that was, binge drinking and being an alcoholic. It's something I can't even express how intense it was for me. And I remember Dave just always saying to me, I'm in control of this. It's not affecting anybody but me. And those words are still so hard for me because alcoholism does not just affect the person that's drinking. It affects the whole entire family. And I think for me, that night of the DUI was the worst day of my life, the worst night of my life. And when I had to go to each one of my children, I didn't hide it under the rug. I've had a lot of wisdom and knowledge given to me through my schooling, through my years of behavioral health and nursing, and I wasn't going to hide it. It was real. It was the reality of our family, and I didn't know how we were going to work through it or get through it. But I had to go to each one of my children and tell them that their dad was in jail. And, you know, each child has their own experience with that and how it felt. But it was just so heartbreaking to have to do that. And then another thing that was, you know, hard about that weekend when DUI happened, like I said, I was on call and I was at work, and it was my responsibility job-wise to be on call for that whole weekend for the hospice company that I worked with. And I got the call that he had been arrested with a DUI when I was leaving, taking care of my patient that had just fallen and was getting close to dying. And they asked me, will you take responsibility for him? And I thought to myself, hell no, are you kidding me? He can take responsibility for himself. But it just, I remember just sitting down on the stairs coming out of that little patient's apartment and thinking to myself, what in the world is you know, happening? Like, my whole world had just been shattered. And it was so embarrassing for me and shameful for me to have to call my supervisor and tell them, because I was so emotional, I could not take care of my little patient's lives the rest of that weekend. And the significance of that, still, it's really hard to talk about because I am a very loyal and dependable person. And because of my husband's actions, I had to, you know, call and say, oh, I'm so sorry. My husband is an alcoholic and he just got a DUI. That is just so hard to say to people. They were very understanding, and then I didn't have to work the rest of the weekend. But in the course of that weekend, I left Dave in jail. He was going to take responsibility for himself. I didn't know very much about the legal system. My husband and my awesome son they've taught me a lot. I didn't even know where the Davis County Jail was to go and pick Dave up. And I said, if I leave him there, how does he get home? And they said, oh, we'll let him sober up overnight and give him a bus ticket or a bus token in the morning. And I said, great. So I remember looking at a family picture that we had just taken a couple weeks before that. It was a beautiful family picture. It was in poppies. And I considered burning that night. That I couldn't sleep. I was planning on how I was going to end our marriage, how I was going to get a divorce and leave. I was done.
Well, I just have to say, just as a pause, that it is so incredibly courageous for me and noble that you guys would be willing to be so vulnerable, both you, Kirsten, to talk about the pain, and you, David, to talk about to be willing to speak publicly about something that so many would feel shame talking about. We've got about 30 more minutes, and there's kind of three things I really want to focus on. One is, David, how you got better. If you had to give tips on how you got better, I'd love to hear that. I'd love to talk about how you guys rebuilt your trust and your relationship. And then I want to talk about how the mixed faith marriage works now. So we've got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So David, let's just say there's people out there who are struggling with alcohol or drug addiction. No one wants to lose their home. No one wants to lose their job. No one wants DUIs. No one wants to wreck their marriage. And yet there are, part of the reason why drug and alcohol addiction is so pernicious is that you can try and quit, you can want to quit, but it can pull you right back in. How long have you been sober, David? If you're
4.5 years.
4.5 years. So can you tell us, just in 5 minutes, what were your keys to success, and what would you suggest to others who want to successfully become sober? How do you do it? How did you do it?
Well, so you have, as I said, that there's going to be painful experiences, pain that is going to bring the alcoholic to these moments of clarity. And when you have as an alcoholic, if you have when you have the moment of clarity, not if but when you'll have them. When you have them, take advantage of it and go get help. Start searching. It's not like you just go search and you find the end. I didn't just go search out and I found the answer immediately. It was a process. I kept looking. I had that moment of clarity when I got the DUI. I started to get some help, made some progress, and a couple of years later, I relapsed. And as soon as I relapsed, I wasn't very long. I'm like, I realized I couldn't do this on my own. That's when I started looking for AA as a resource. I had some experience with it as a youth, so I kind of knew about it. And I didn't just go find a meeting and it was the right meeting either. I just went and started trying different meetings, and I finally came across the particular meeting that really clicked with me. So you just have to kind of start when you have a moment of clarity, start looking for help. AA is a good resource, but it's not just magic either. You have to find the meeting that's the fit. You have to, and AA doesn't just work on its own either. It takes a lot of work from the individual.
Sponsor is a key.
Yes, having sponsorship is really a key. And to me, the thing that makes AA successful is the intimacy part of it. Recovery from alcoholism, for me, the thing that was really the thing that worked was connection, learning to connect to other people. Kirsten just told her painful story about my behavior, and that's, as a recovered alcoholic, it's painful and difficult to listen to when your loved ones tell you those stories. But you have to just listen, just learn, just stopping, kind of letting the internal pain just kind of let it rest, listen to it. But listening to and connecting with people, people that were with me through this whole thing. I just stopping and listening to those people, but I needed help to learn to do that. I had to have guidance. So sponsorship was important, and a lot of the program of AA for me was a process of becoming self-aware. It kind of works on drawing back, or deflating ego is the term that gets used, is this deflating the ego. And people think that ego is this, or pride is this bad thing. We all have ego. It's not anything bad to have ego. But if you want to make a change, to make a change in my life, I had to have the ego deflated, if that makes sense, so that I could learn and make a change. And so there's a lot of just, for me, I was committed to this. I wanted to understand myself. There was more. It was not just like alcoholism. The bottles are just symbols. It's not just the drinking. It was the internal thinking. There was this pattern of thinking of how I thought of the world and how I thought of myself that I really had to learn to discover and understand. It's not like it was my fault. It was just something that I kind of grew up in. And one thing I really want to mention is I had a friend tell me about this idea of an inner audience. It's kind of a different term, but that he was actually talking about kids, like playing Xbox. I think this individual, he's somebody I have a lot of respect for. He's actually a descendant of Brigham Young, and he kind of talked to me about this idea of an inner audience, where as you develop as a child and into adulthood, all the different there's yourself, and there's the things around you, religion and associating with other people, but you sort of develop this inner audience where you think you're just out doing your thing, but actually there's an internal self that's reacting to everything that you do. And so him explaining that kind of gave me an awareness to that in myself, that that there's and it's not like you can just negotiate with that either. It believes what it believes. If it thinks that it needs to punish you, it will. And it can be really relentless and cause a lot of pain. So just learning to look at myself in a very deep way. And like mindfulness, I learned about mindfulness meditation, just learning to just listen, sit and meditate and listen to my emotions without any judgment. Like my emotions are what they are, and just a lot of listening and reflection. And they talk about in AA the fearless inventory, just without any regard, just really listening and evaluating oneself. It's a very, at first it feels very painful. There's a lot of things your gut reaction is just to put this thing in the closet. I just don't want to think about this. I want to ignore it. But it's sort of a process of opening up that closet, taking things out, and really looking at things without any personal judgment, learning to kind of let go of that personal judgment. A lot of the ways that we react in life are sort of automatic. And we tend to give ourselves all this judgment for things when we're really acting out of a lot of pain. And so just learning to sort of understand and see that in myself. It's not like something I can express very easily in a podcast like this. It's a process, a very personal process that I went through, and Alcoholics Anonymous was sort of the vessel that helped me do that. I'm not going to say that that's the only one. There's others like it, I'm sure, but that was the one that worked for me. And there's individuals there that were there to help me. But yeah, I don't know. I came.
It's still hard for you. It's still hard for you to do that sometimes too. It's very hard for him still to be alone with himself. For me, I love it because I'm like, please let me be alone. I take care of patients all day long. I take care of family, but it's interesting because we just had a conversation and some developments over the past weekend where Dave's like, it's still really hard for me to be by myself, like be with that inner audience. And so, like Dave said, it's a process to recover, and we're still recovering as a couple, and we'll still run into different scenarios and different things in life that remind us that, oh, maybe maybe we need to go to counseling again for another tune-up, and that's okay. It's important to know that it's not ever fixed. Does that make sense?
Sure. That's why they say you're never cured, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a disease. It's something that you manage. It's something that you learn to overcome and make healthy. But there's always going to be triggers or things that in your life that you realize, oh, I think it's time to adjust that or look at that, or what do we need to do to get the healthy coping mechanism or the healthy side of this taken care of so it doesn't pop up again.
One thing that feels kind of really important that I want to make sure I cover was there was this aha moment for me. I guess through my recovery, there was just certain moments, sometimes when I would learn something and it would just kind of click at my inner self, right? So there was something in my core that would believe and latch onto something. And one of those was I was really having a hard time with this sense of worthiness. Like, being raised up in the LDS faith, there's just everything's wrapped around whether you're worthy or not, or whether I'm not worthy for God's love, whether or not I'm going to have some kind of divine help and whether I'm not doing enough to do that. And my sponsor told me one time when I was sort of having one of these moments talking to him about this, he said, well, if you're willing, you're worthy. And for whatever reason at that moment, it just snapped with me. And it's like, oh yeah. And I believe that. And that was a big game changer for me. And it just changed the way that I feel about what I really need to do. And really, I just learned that it became kind of easy for me to walk the road, because it's just a matter of every day I get up, I have a routine to kind of get myself positive in the morning, and I just live that. I suit up, show up, I live my day, I go to work, I do my best, and then and that's all. If I've gotten up that day and I'm willing to advance and do the right things that day, then I'm fine.
And how do you cope with the impulse to drink when it comes, David? What do you do? How do you respond to the impulse?
Kind of strangely enough, it took about a year of AA, and I haven't had the impulse. The impulse just kind of went away. So I haven't had that. I do have periods where I really feel kind of shaken up inside, like Kirsten said, when I'm alone. So sometimes I'll be on a business trip and I'm by myself. I really have a hard time there. And sometimes I've like gone back to smoking cigarettes. Like I'll smoke cigarettes for a weekend. It's kind of weird, and then I throw them away. So I haven't always coped with things in the right way, but I've just never had an impulse to drink. That hasn't been a thing for me. So, but I think that's the smoking thing, when that's occurred, that's sort of should be like kind of a canary in the mine kind of a thing. But
it's like it's lesser, like, okay, I'm not gonna pick up the bottle. I'll find emotional release in the cigarette. So, which is it's difficult for me when that happens. That brings out my post-traumatic stress, because I'm like, are you sure the bottle of alcohol wasn't in there? So it's just something that we're working through right now, realizing that there are still those moments in life where, and there always will be, right? It's just learning how to cope with that in a healthy way.
But yeah, and I think that, so I'm trying to be open here, because I'm trying to just paint a real picture here. It's not like I recovered and everything's fixed, right? And that idea, I think, when somebody goes into recovery, there's a sort of desire to get to this magic point, and now things are fixed. Now I can live my life. The truth is that you can live your life right now. The first day of the person that's recovering, you can start to live your life right now. It doesn't happen. It's not something that's going to happen in some future. It happens right now, today, every day, and you're not going to there's not some magic perfection that's to be reached. It's a new fresh start every single day, and a lot of watching myself and watching my emotions, and just when I see that my emotions are not right, just going back and for me, it's a lot of my patterns and habits. So it's hard for Kirsten because I feel kind of robotic, but I just have these routines. I just do these. I have like my daily routine, and I'll just do that day in and day out. And for me, that's very comforting. And for Kirsten, it's like, how can it looks monotonous to her sometimes. But for me, that I do that.
And this probably goes without saying, Dave, but for you, does recovery mean never drinking alcohol again? Is that not even a sip, not ever a beer?
Yeah, if I drink alcohol, I'll go back. That's just the pattern with alcohol. I know that for a fact.
Okay.
If I drink alcohol, I'll fall back into that pattern. That doesn't mean that I'm done. That would mean I need to focus and go by and start. Basically, I need to start over. Not start is the wrong word, but I need to go AA meetings, sponsorship, just really immediately.
Go right back.
Yeah, but I can't. It's not like something where an alcoholic can't just drink and go back to normal. It doesn't work.
Does that mean that for you avoid any situation where other people are going to be drinking, or where you could be invited to drink?
we kind of choose those things together, because there are things in life where there might be alcohol present, but for me, it's not a big deal, but I'm very sensitive to Dave and his perception. So there are things that we do exclude ourselves from. We understand that's part of managing the disease process and understanding what that is and what it does. And so, but we went on a cruise together in January, and there was alcohol everywhere on that cruise boat. Dave said he was fine, and there wasn't any problems with it there. But sometimes we're invited to certain things, and we just have to choose not to go because it will be too much of an intimate situation, and it's too hard on Dave.
Well, I would say that with alcohol's everywhere. It's at every gas station. It's not something
that you can stay away from completely ever. So there's been events that I've just kind of chosen not to go to because I know that alcohol is going to be kind of the center of that. They just don't really, that doesn't appeal. It's not so much that I'm afraid of the alcohol, more that doesn't appeal to me, and I don't really want to put myself through that. But if I'm not in a place, emotionally where I don't need to drink, then I can get it anywhere. It's real easy. So.
All right. Well, this is such a story of hope. And so I just can't thank you guys enough for being willing to tell your story, to give some tips and tricks, because I know you're not alone. I have some close friends of mine who have been through some similar things. And so I just think it's really important that we talk about it. We talk about how to get better, and we talk about how to move forward. Really quickly, what I want to end is talking about how, and this will probably deserve its own deep dive, either with you guys or with other couples, but how do you navigate the mixed faith marriage now? What are let's just say you each were to give 3 to 5 tips to other couples that are trying to make it work. What tips would you give on how to have a healthy and happy marriage when one of you believes and one of you doesn't? Kirsten, why don't you go first? What are 3 to 5 lessons either you as a believer have learned? Actually, let's do it this way. Kirsten, what advice would you give to believers who are thinking about leaving their spouse, or who are really angry at their spouse, or they're just stuck in this rut where the mixed faith marriage is not working? What are the tips you would give to the believer to keep the marriage healthy and to strengthen it?
For me, having that eternal perspective of what I entered into in the beginning gives me a lot of strength to continue in our relationship and for our family. I believe that we'll be an eternal family. I know that God is very aware of our family and what we are doing and on a day-to-day basis, and I don't worry about the future. I live in the present, and I embrace that.
So for you, does your version of the gospel, and I've found this to be key for the believer part of the couple, is your view that God's going to make it all work out in the end, that you don't need to ruin your life now for some future thing? Yes. God will work it out, and trust God, right?
Yes. So one of my favorite quotes from Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon is "Let go and let God," and that's really, really easy to say, but truly, I've tried to apply that in my life in many different ways, and I do believe that God knows me, and He knows my husband. He knows what each one of us have been through in our lives and our journeys and where we're going. Another key component for me is that we both still are spiritual people. We both are, our values are the same. We want to have our family together. We love our children. We did that values experiment in the mixed faith marriage retreat, and that was such an eye-opener to me to look at that and to see that we have so much in common. And it's definitely, you have to rebuild yourself, because that original expectation and foundation isn't there anymore. But it is, to me, worth it for my family's sake, because I go back to that eternal perspective. I know that I want my family for eternity, and that, like you said, God is going to work it out. And I think that one of my personal mantras in life, in many different aspects, like I shared before, is that quote from Al-Anon. It's had a huge impact on my life. Let go and let God.
So just kind of acceptance.
Yep. Also for me, to realize that it's okay for us to be on different spiritual journeys. It brings a wholesome in my life to sit down with each other and respect each other, and have, which we still work on, but we're in a different place with our communication than we were in the beginning. And I think it's a key component to gaining a relationship of trust back with each other, and to understand each other as individuals, to continue to master that in our relationship and our marriage.
How do you get over looking at him like this huge disappointment and betrayer? Do you, because I always feel like no healthy marriage can survive if either of you view the other as a disappointment. How do you get over the fact that, from your perspective, he wrecked the deal and he's spoiled what felt like an eternal family, at least for now? Do you view Dave as a disappointment now? And if not, how did you get over that?
I don't view him as a disappointment now in my life. I have in the past felt betrayed, and the disappointment's been there, and the hurt. I've expressed that, through what we talked about. So for me, looking at Dave as an individual, and honestly, I believe that God has, in certain times of my life, blessed me with his perspective. And he is an amazing person. It's the individuality, I guess, that I focus on, and that I truly believe that we are all children of God, and we come here to have a journey, and the journey's not perfect, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're here to connect with each other and to help each other through that journey. And it's not easy. It's hard sometimes. It's really hard.
And you say in the end, your marriage has been strengthened, Kirsten. Is that right?
Yes. It's been strengthened, but it hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of pain, and there's been a lot of loneliness. But, in my mind, if I'm looking at it at a religious perspective and a believer, I believe that my marriage will be eternal. We fought for our family. We fight for each other. That's what we do every single day.
Love it. David, if you had some tips for the non-believer on how to navigate this in a way that leads to a healthy outcome versus just pain and suffering and conflict and division, what tips would you give the non-believer?
Okay. Yeah. One of them, first one, I guess, would be, especially something that was told to me or advised to me during my recovery. And the piece of advice was that you have to, what's the word? You need to find peace with the religion of your childhood. That's something that I had heard, and I believed that was correct when I heard it, but I'm like, I'm not ready to do that yet.
And he's still working on that. He's with his religion.
But I would say,
from his upbringing.
not even from a recovering alcoholic perspective, I'd say from any perspective, in my opinion, that's probably a pretty true statement. Not that a person has to do that if you don't want to, but I think to find some inner peace, I think that you have to find some way to find peace with the religion child. There's all kinds of religions. Religion is part of humanity all over the world. There's all kinds of them, and this thing that Mormons, post-Mormons, whatever you want to call us, go through is not something unique to us. This happens to Catholics, happens to Baptists, happens to all kinds of faiths. So finding peace with that is just an important thing. And also, I would say, from a certain point of view, Mormonism is true. All the religions are true. But in the same way, from my perspective, it's in the same way that like a dollar is true, right? We could say from looking at our currency or whatever that there's a lot of corruption and there's a lot of things that are problems with that. But the fact is that our overall society believes in using currency or dollar bills or whatever or money to buy things. And I can't just like say, well, I don't believe that. Or I can say that, but it's going to cause me a lot of harm and a lot of problems in my life. So just there's sort of a reality that almost everybody that's in my life is a believer in Mormonism. That's just a reality. And if I'm only going to cause myself damage by trying to ignore that fact or fight against that fact. So I've actually started going back to church with Kirsten on Sundays, and part of that is because I've been listening to her, and I hear her say that it's painful to sit at church alone. There's sort of a stigma in to have to be this wife with just the kids and dragging the kids to church. So I go to, I'm working on not rolling my eyes internally when I'm in the meetings. That's kind of the next step, but it's a spiritual thing for me to go to church with my wife and my daughter and my son if he comes too, because I know I'm doing something that feels good to them. I'm making them feel more like they're the kind of the norm. So there is a point of view where attending a church meeting, even for somebody that doesn't buy into the truth claims, there can be ways to look at it and it can be a spiritual thing.
It brings a wholeness to me. This was not my idea, by the way. Dave came to me about a month ago and said that he was going to start. I've been peacefully attending church for several years by myself because I realized that that's my spiritual journey. And I, many years ago, was done dragging him with me. I really don't care what the Joneses think. You can love me for who I am and love my family and get to know them. So I'm past that, if that makes sense. But do I always want my family to come to church with me? Of course I do, because I believe it. And I believe that there's great things there. So this was a very personal decision from Dave. I'm thankful. And I'm glad that he wants to do that. But it does bring a sense of wholeness to have the whole family there for sacrament meeting. I just wanted to point out from my perspective.
The other thing I'll add is just a belief in God, right? So I don't believe in God in the context that maybe Kirsten does, and we wouldn't like explain things the same way, but really it's not that the way we believe in higher power or God is not that different. If you really kind of boil it down, I've kind of done the thought process of the atheist kind of thought process. I've been through that dialogue in my mind a lot of times. I've never for me, I guess I see God or higher power as being sort of interwoven into, like an atheist might say, like the universe or something. I think that maybe that's just the thumbprint that we are able to see of our higher power of God. or however you want to name him or her. I'm not really biased in any way in that way, but I think that that you can see sort of a power that's interwoven just in the way that humans interact, the way we interact with the world, the way that we interact and do things. There's sort of an underlying power, an unseen power, things that we just can't be aware of. And I just think there's something there, something way bigger than ourselves. And, maybe you could say that it's unlikely, or odds are there's nothing after we die and it's just kind of over. But I would say it's also extremely unlikely that anything exists. I would think that why would anything? Just my logical brain says there should really be nothing. but yet there's not nothing. There's all this, all this complexity and even pain and beauty and all these really sometimes difficult and sometimes really wonderful things. There's just all this, and I think that there's something really big and profound and some meaning to be had in all that. And as far as the afterlife, we'll see what happens. But I think I live a good life now, and I think that will take care of itself when we get there. So I don't know, being able to relate that way. I hope that you froze up, so I hope you're there. But,
I'm here. Can you see me okay?
Being able to relate on that terms has been big for us.
Absolutely.
Are you there, John? Can you hear us?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Well, it looks like we've frozen and I don't know what that is, but it is time for us to sort of maybe come to a close in this interview. I want to thank everyone who's been tuning in. There you are. Hey, Dave.
Yep. Hopefully they caught all that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for your wisdom, for your vulnerability, for your willingness to share. I think the insights, particularly that you gained, Dave, about emotional intimacy and the things Kirsten was talking about honesty, it's experiences like this that let people know that in many ways is the way through, whether it's a mixed faith marriage, whether it's addiction, alcoholism. So much of it really comes down to getting to know yourself, becoming emotionally aware of who you are and of what you're experiencing, learning to be with that and accept it. And then with your most important relationships, being emotionally candid and open and vulnerable. And sometimes that's the scariest thing. Sometimes it feels very risky, but in almost every case, it's going to lead to healing. It's going to lead to healthier relationships. It's going to lead to growth. And it's in many ways the antidote for ineffective ways of self-medicating and of coping with distress. So David and Kirsten, I just want to let you guys know that you guys are role models to all of us for developing self-awareness, for healing the broken and the difficult places, and then for being just utterly committed to your relationship with each other, putting people before beliefs, and modeling resilience, but also intimacy and healing and growth as a couple and as individuals. This is just really inspiring, and I know your story is going to help a lot of people. So sincere thanks to you both. Any final words from either of you? Dave, why don't you go first, and then Kirsten will end with you.
Yeah.
Final words about either addiction and recovery or mixed faith marriage. What do you guys want to say to those listening? Dave, you go first.
Yeah, I don't have a lot more, but I would just echo what you were just saying. Really, intimacy, being connected to other people. That's what this life is all about. That's where that's just the creamy core. It's just a wonderful thing. But it can be painful and scary getting there. There are a lot of people that have very, very difficult circumstances they're dealing with. Sometimes it's close to impossible for people, given what they've gone through to get there. So, if you haven't had these kind of difficulties in life, just a lot of understanding for people that maybe can't do it. Because honestly, people sometimes honestly can't do it. Like they can't. And so I guess the connection is just wonderful. That if there's anything you can put your effort into, that's a chance that things are going to get better, if things are difficult in your life, that's where to do it. But also a lot of understanding and empathy towards people that are not.
That's great. Yeah, not all marriages are meant to persist. There is such a good thing as a good divorce. That's not the point here. But I think when a relationship is fundamentally a sound one, and most importantly, when a couple or children would serve to benefit from the relationship continuing, we just want to make sure everyone has the best shot at they can at saving the marriages that are worth saving. Kirsten, what do you want to conclude with in terms of advice or feedback from those loved ones of those who are struggling with substance abuse and addiction, and then most importantly, for those in mixed faith marriages? How do you want to give some final thoughts?
So for me, it boils down to love. And like I said before, that we're all children of God, and just embracing that. And like Dave said, we can have those moments where we can have an eternal glimpse or an eternal perspective of a person that we're not understanding. And for me, I said in the very beginning, I believe in forgiveness. I believe in the atonement. And so there's nothing through this journey that we've been on with alcoholism and recovery where I should have thrown in the towel, or even, in our interfaith marriage, what we're learning together and learning to embrace as a couple, just our individuality and who we are and how God made us, is just an amazing experience. And it brings a lot of hope to the future to love one another in that way. I'm a quote person, and I mentioned one of my other quotes that I really loved from Al-Anon, but I'll just end my thoughts with this because it just kind of ties up how I feel and how I look at things. It says, "Love isn't perfect. It isn't a fairy tale or a storybook, and it doesn't always come easy. Love is overcoming obstacles, facing challenges, fighting to be together, holding on and never letting go. It is a short word, easy to spell, difficult to define, and impossible to live without. Love is work, but most of all, love is realizing every hour, every minute, every second of it was worth it because you did it together." That's what it's all about, is love. And we just need to incorporate that with everybody in our lives and love.
Beautiful. Well, Dave and Kirsten, thank you so much for your beautiful stories, for your encouragement, for your words of wisdom. I know they're going to help keep some important families together and to give some people hope who are feeling hopeless right now. So much love to you both. I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on Mormon Stories and share your story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who joined us today live. We had a good audience. I want to thank everyone for participating. Please make sure and share your comments and questions. We love to have your feedback. I want to thank everyone who supports the Open Stories Foundation and makes it possible. We do want to interview more mixed faith couples in the weeks and months ahead. If there are other people that also want to share stories about addiction recovery, we're interested in those stories too. But most importantly, thanks to all those who make this podcast possible. If you love what we do, if you want to see it continue, just $10 or $20 a month, a recurring donation can really make the difference. So please go to mormonstories.org and support us. Shout out to all the podcasts in the Open Stories Foundation, Mormon Matters, The Thoughtful Faith, Mormon Mental Health, Mormon Transitions. Check all those podcasts out. Thanks to Amy Grubbs and Cody Layton, our staff, for making these podcasts possible. Thanks to the OSF board. And again, thanks to all our donors. Please give us a positive review on Facebook. Like Mormon Stories Podcast page, give Mormon Stories Podcast page a positive review. Please go to iTunes and give us a positive review there. That really helps. And again, please support us if you can. Check out our events page at mormonstories.org/events. We would love to do our part to help people transition either individually in their marriages. And our events are always rated for 4.7, 4.9 out of 5. They're rated very highly. So please check them out. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Take care. And we'll see you guys again soon on Mormon Stories. Love you guys.